Okay, so I welcome again everyone who here and who participate in this event. So this is high-level event that will emphasize and discuss Ukraine commitments under the Green Recovery implementation. And this is the great platform to launch joint actions with the Ukraine, European Union, and the German government. And so for the welcome speech, I will invite the minister, Mr. Ruslan Strelets, who will tell about how climate plays a role during the war in Ukraine and how important it is. So, Mr. Ruslan Strelets, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely glad to see everybody here in this perfect pavilion, which we have. Only thankful to our partners, our colleagues, a lot of European countries, and I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy that in the time of war we have the opportunity to be here and to communicate about climate change and about our obligations and what to do for make these obligations to realize this obligation. So I'm pleased to address you today at another climate summit. There is a lot of Ukraine at COP27 this year. World politicians talk about Ukraine. We take a proactive part in our negotiations. For the first time, Ukraine has its own pavilion at this conference. On behalf of all Ukraine, I want to thank the German Society for International Cooperation, GIZ, for the support in organizing this pavilion. Ukraine attracted attention not only because it became a victim of the largest armed invasion of our time. Ukraine has not abandoned this commitment to the world community, not for a single day, and in particular regarding climate policy. Just as before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine seeks to contribute to implementation of the European Green Deal. We aim to achieve climate neutrality. Also, now we have to make much more efforts. We still aim to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 65% to 2030, even though we have to deal with the catastrophic effects of war on our environment. According to the latest estimates of the Ministry of Environmental Protection on Ukraine and international experts, additional emission of greenhouse gases caused by military action on the territory of Ukraine amounted to about 33 million tons of CO2. The largest share of those emissions was caused by fires, more than 23 million tons of CO2. 80% of fires occurred in the territories where hostilities have happened or continue now. We have also calculated that the recovery process will result in emission of 49 million tons of CO2. The terrorist country must be held responsible for the greenhouse gas emission that were caused by its action. Russian armed aggression undermines our recent efforts in mitigation of the climate crisis. It poses risks to everything we do against global warming today. It makes us consider every step we plan to make more carefully. The Egyptian side that hosts the climate summit this year emphasized that this year COP27 focuses on implementation and making specific action. We will transform our climate ambitions into specific objectives, which are now defined in the National Recovery Plan in Ukraine, which was presented in Lugano in July this year. Implementation of this plan requires combined efforts, as well as support from our long-term partners. The designation of the Ukraine Climate Office, which will be created in Ukraine, is an excellent case of support to Ukraine from long-standing and reliable partners like Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action of Germany and the European Union, which will be implemented by GIZ. Designation of the Climate Office will provide a real support of Ukraine in implementing its climate goals on the way to decarbonization. It is planned that the Climate Office will provide support to the government of Ukraine, sites and regions, enterprises and other businesses in respect to the implementation of climate policy elements. The Climate Office, I'm sure, will help to decarbonize sector of the economy, develop the governance of climate adaptation, expand opportunity for youth and regions toward the EU Green Deal and implementation of the Paris Agreement provision. Development and support of particular approach to climate financing specifically for Ukraine will also become one of the priority activities of the Ukrainian Climate Office. So I invite all countries that seek to contribute to combating global warming to cooperate with our Climate Office in Ukraine in future. Once again, I want to say that I'm extremely happy to see everybody here. Every day I say thank you to all our colleagues, to all countries for the support in this not easy time. This is time when everybody need to be together, and I'm sure that Ukraine and all civilized world will win in this war. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you very much, Minister Strelets, for your inspiring words and for the plans for the green recovery of Ukraine. And by this, I will invite all our speakers to take the seats and to take part in our panel discussion. So today we have Stefan Wenzel, the Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, who is the member of the Bundestag Parliamentary Group of Alliance 90, the Greens, and the former Environmental Minister of Lower Saxony, and since July 2022, appointed as the Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. Yeah, we welcome you. Then we have Mr. Mark van Huykelen, who is Ambassador at Large for Climate Diplomacy and the European External Action Service. He was the ambassador of the European Union to the World Trade Organization and also a director in the European Commission, Directorate General for Trade, responsible for sustainable development, economic partnership agreements, and agri-food and fisheries. I welcome you, Mr. van Huykelen. We have Dr. Dirk Buschle, the Deputy Director of the Energy Community Secretariat since 2011, and who's led its legal until unit since 2007. He is also a professor and chairholder of the European Energy Policy Chair at College of Europe in Bruges. He teaches the annual course, European and International Energy Policy and Governments. I welcome you. And we have the slight minute change. Unfortunately, Ingrid Gabriela Hohen got sick, but we pleased to invite Dr. Daphne Frank, the Senior Climate Coordinator of GIZ. And before, she has been working as head of global project to make cities fit for climate change. We thank you very much for your flexibility and invite you on our planning. So let's start our discussion. Dear State Secretary Wenzel, we know that Germany and your ministry that is responsible for climate protection has a large support of Ukraine. How do you assist Ukraine in this complex field of climate transformation? Tell us a little bit more. How is it?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's very impressive to meet together here today on the Ukrainian pavilion at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. How do you manage to build up such an impressive pavilion? And I've heard it, your experts done it in 3 weeks, where others are planning for months or for years. So it's really impressive in this very special situation after the beginning of the Russian war against Ukraine. And so we feel very much with the people in the Ukraine, and we hope with you that it would be possible to get a peaceful future. And we want all Russian troops to leave the occupied country of Ukraine as fast as possible. And I'm happy to talk today also about the future, about transition, about the reconstruction of all what was destroyed. And I can see here very impressive that you try to build up a future with renewable energy and very strong efficiency, energy efficiency. So thank you very much to invite me.
I thank you very much for these kind words. And indeed, this showed that Ukrainians are a very hardworking nation. And we show that despite the war, we believe in our victory, and we already think about the green recovery and the great future for our country. I thank you very much. And now I will ask a few questions to Mr. Van Huykelen. Ukraine has suffered a tremendous losses in human lives, environmental and infrastructure. And do you see that the future reconstruction of the country important, and how the climate policy and green recovery challenge, and how to combine these challenges?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me join the State Secretary in also saying that I'm very happy to be with you here. It is extremely important that Ukraine, despite the horrors it is going through, shows that it is part of the world community and that it has a role to play in the global fight against climate change. Let me also start by saying that we as a European Union, despite what is happening now on the side of energy, is staying the course on climate. Russia has taken out more than 80 billion cubic meters of gas out of the world market. We have to adapt to it, and we are buying gas in other parts of the world, but we are going to cut our gas consumption already by 15% this year. And we hope that in 3 years' time, we will no longer be dependent on any cubic meter of gas from the Russian Federation. Ukraine, despite the unimaginable atrocities that you are facing, is still adamant to stick to its climate goals. And that is something that I think we should all commend you for, that despite the short-term daily confrontations that you have to cope with, you still want to go for the 2030 targets that you have set for yourself and for climate neutrality. On the 24th of June, the European Union has granted Ukraine candidate status to become a member of the European Union. And that implies that you will adopt the whole body of EU law in your legislation, including that of climate. And so you have a big task on your hands. You already started before the 24th of June, but you have to redouble now to make sure that your legislation is in line with that of the European Union as regards Fit for 55, but also REPowerEU that we're now working on. You're living under a terribly dark cloud, but this dark cloud may also have a silver lining. Given that so much has been destroyed, you can also now rebuild back better. A lot of infrastructure, a lot of housing has been destroyed. When you reconstruct, you will be able to do so by means of the most modern technologies. So you will be able to leapfrog and to go into new houses, new types of energy efficiency that many countries will struggle to emulate you on. So let that be a sort of impulse for you to get into this technology leap. We will help you with this. It is something that obviously is not for tomorrow because you're still in a war, but as soon as this is over, let us work together to rebuild back better.
We thank you very much for your strong support, for your commitments to help Ukraine, and this support is very valued, and we hope that we already started the work, the hard work for climate policy, and we hope that this will be faster now with all your support and help. I thank you very much. And we go to our next speaker, Mr. Bouchlet. Can you tell us a little bit more what is the role of renewable energy in green reconstruction?
No, it's all right. I just have to switch it on. Thanks a lot. And of course, I would like to join the State Secretary and the Ambassador in commending and really applauding Ukraine for not only withstanding the Russian aggression, but also in fulfilling its duties and commitments and obligations under the Energy Community Treaty. Ukraine is not only a member of the Energy Community, it's currently its presidency, and it never stopped working on reforming the country, even through the darkest times. When talking about renewables, I look here at the quote by President Zelensky, who says, Ukraine can, and I'm certain will become a green energy hub for Europe. The formula to do that is renewables. And I'm speaking about renewables also on a personal note as well. Together with the ministry and with all the investors that currently invested already in Ukraine, we made possible 2 years ago in a long mediation process in difficult financial times that the sector stays afloat. And now look what the Russians have done to it. 25% of renewable energy is off operation, and this covers almost all of the wind power plants in southern and eastern Ukraine, and it is clear that this has to be rebuilt. And what we have to make sure is that we don't have to start from zero, but we also support the Ukrainian renewable sector in this troubled time when the focus is evidently on other sources of energy. It is also very clear that renewable energy, as President Zelensky expressed it, will take center stage in the recovery of Ukraine. It is not only for Ukrainian benefits, but also for Europe's benefit, because Ukraine has what we don't have enough. And I'm not talking only about solar and wind, but also about the land that's needed to harvest them. And in doing that, we need to focus on two things. We need to focus on getting the framework right, as the ambassador said, to create confidence in investors, in public supporters as well, that investments in renewables after the war can happen and can happen very fast. And we also need, as just has been said, to take all opportunities and use all chances, not only just to roll out a conventional renewable sector in Ukraine, but to leapfrog, to use the most modern technology, the most modern regulation and legislation to make sure that Ukraine can become a model for Europe and even for the entire world. And for doing this, the Energy Community is launching a renewable renaissance project with a study to address the potential and to assess the potential and to model the possibilities for precisely this leapfrogging. And based on this, we will engage with stakeholders in a transparent, inclusive procedure, and of course, the ministries in the first place, but also investors and civil society to make that happen. And one last point on the integrated planning this requires. It's important that the building back better of the renewable sector in Ukraine does not just happen without coordination. And for this, through the energy community, Ukraine has already committed to adopt targets for 2030, renewables targets, greenhouse gas emission target, but also national energy and climate plans, which are the best possible way, because they are EU tested, to make sure that renewables in Ukraine can take the center stage they deserve.
Yes, Ukraine indeed has a large potential in the renewable energy, and we know that there is still a lot of work to do, but we hope for the fast recovery and the fast speed up the process of renewable energy sources. I thank you very much. And our last speaker for today will be, my question will be to you. What do you think based on your experience implementation climate projects, how technical cooperation and capacity development can help to implement ambitious climate policy sustainably and efficiently?
Yes, distinguished panelists and participants, first of all, I'm really honored to be part of this panel. And I also would like to congratulate you for this really nicely designed pavilion with digital elements, with visible elements, but also to bring across the future development for the Ukraine, which is to build up back better, to rehabilitate what has been destroyed. I personally, as an architect and urban planner, in my heart, it's difficult to see these pictures on television. And we are here, we as GIZ, we are an implementing agency. We already cooperate with you, with our national and highly qualified international experts, both with them abroad and also in the Ukraine directly. And I'm also honored because this is also the launch of our project Capacities for Climate Action. And we will build up a climate office. And our main goal will be to bring together national institutions, local institutions, civil society, the business sector to work on and to really support you for a climate smart green recovery. Yes. This will be a very difficult task. What will be needed? We will need a lot of funding, of course. A lot of infrastructure has been destroyed, housing and so on, but we also need a lot of skills. We need new skills, we need new ideas. We have to be very flexible, but also what is the main issue is we need to involve the people to build up in a greener and smarter way. Without the people living there, it will not function. So we are here to support you. And as we did in the past, we will also support you in future and to align with the international development goals and to be able to have a more greener future also in the Ukraine.
I thank you very much for these insights and for saying the beginning of the work on climate office. And we believe that this is the great opportunity for us for capacity building, for learning the gaps, finding the gaps, and find the solutions how we can transform and build back better. Yes.
I would like to mention another point. In the moment we see that Russia is trying to destroy the Ukrainian grid, and if that will happen, there will be no electricity in winter. So it's very, very important to save the Ukrainian grid and to have enough spare parts. And it's not so easy to get spare parts for grid. Normally, even if you have enough money to buy them, it needs a lot of months to produce this spare parts. For example, generators or transformators. It's normally you have to wait a year to get a new one. And so I think it's very important to look around if there are spare parts, for example, in Germany or other European countries, which are already there at other companies who maybe have a storage for some spare parts. And it would be good if we can talk also about possibilities to support it on the European in the European Union. We try to contact our grid, our companies who are responsible for the grid, to look if we can find some spare parts, because that's, I think, is very urgent, and we need the grid to have a renewable and a very efficiency grid in the future time, in the peace time coming in the future. So, and we try to support that with our IKI project, our International Climate Initiative, and our Green Fund for Ukraine, and our Just Transition project. And I would be happy if we can keep in contact about this.
Yeah, by your words, we see that. Yeah, by your words, we see the complexity of the question, how energy and climate interlink, especially in this situation in Ukraine. Yeah, so do any of you have any words to say, or we can go to the questions from the audience?
Maybe if I can just comment on what you rightly said, State Secretary. Right now, the focus of all our work really must be on making sure that Ukraine gets through this winter, because without that, there's also very difficult to build back something better. And this urgent task, the energy community is supporting in two ways, through organizing the logistics it takes to bring donated equipment to Ukraine. That's not a very easy and trivial job. And second, we set up a Ukraine Energy Support Fund, where the Ministry of Economy and Climate of Germany has committed 10 million to finance. And we're very grateful for that, because it will go straight into procurement of the most needed spare parts for the transmission system operator, Ukrenergo, which is evidently also important to keep renewables connected to the grid and ensure their survival. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Colleagues, I now will open the 10-minute panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Alexander Muller. My question is the following. You mentioned that, yeah, and we agree, of course, that now not all recovery can be implemented in Ukraine while the war is still taking place. Of course, emergency response is needed. That's one thing, but thinking about recovery and longer term implementation cannot be done right now, everything at least. So my question is, what can be done now and what should be done now still during the war when we talk about a green recovery? Thank you.
What can be done now is that the Ukrainian government, together with the international partners, starts charting the course for the day after tomorrow. We hope that big chunks of the country will no longer be damaged further. And so those parts that in all likelihood will now stay more or less unscathed, there you can ask yourself the question, so what should the future look like in terms of energy provision, in terms of new buildings? And that you can start planning now, such that once the war is over, the implementation of your plan can start right away. You have to start thinking now about what life should be once the war is over. And that you can do now.
Maybe to add to this, thank you to the funding from the German government and the EU. We can start just from now on. This is the launch of the climate office, and to build up skills and to provide training for the future rehabilitation. We are able to support you from, well, from now onwards. So we are here really to talk about this later on, but we are here, we have this project running already and several projects which has been mentioned by Mr. Benson and by the EU partners. So I think we can start to build up skills training, to think about, to plan and so on from right now onwards. Thank you.
And if I may just add something very concrete for the renewable sector, they need stability. I'm talking about those who exist already, and that's not a few. There was a quite thriving renewable energy sector before the war. A lot of it has been affected, and they need stability as much as possible under these unstable times. So what will be important is to avoid any retracting from commitments that have been made, to grant them where needed more times to finish their construction, because the many projects are still constructing while the war is going on, and making sure they can be ready at any point, but they need a little bit more time also for the reasons of interrupted supply chains, etc. And I think that would be a concrete help to the renewable energy sector.
Yeah, do we have more? Okay.
Thank you, panelists. I'm Amjad Ben Isa from Jordan. So my question is, did the shock that the catastrophic consequences of fully dependence on renewable resources, did it shift any mindsets in the political parties regarding adopting a greener approach into sustaining their economies and especially energy? So the question is, did the shock of the catastrophic consequences of depending on non-renewable resources, did it change any mindsets in the political parties? Let's say in Germany, are we seeing political parties adopting a greener approach into building economies or not?
I think there's a very strong commitment from Ukraine to strengthen renewable energy, to strengthen efficiency. For example, what President Zelensky said there, I think he will know that build up an electricity system with renewables is the cheapest way to save the energy security in future times. So I think the Ukraine is in a very good way if they use the power. If we strengthen this sector and cooperate in the European Union. So after the beginning of the Russian aggressive war against Ukraine on the 24th of February, there was a meeting of the prime ministers of the European Union at the 8th of March, and they said, we want to accelerate the transition to renewables. We want to accelerate energy efficiency. We want to get rid of Russian fossil fuels. We want to get rid of fossil fuels in the whole, because we know it's the better way, it's the cheaper way, and it's better for the climate. We need to save the climate and to reach 1.5. That's a goal from Paris to save our planet.
The invasion of Ukraine has definitely changed the mindset. There used to be two different communities, a climate community and an energy community. And both were working often separately. After the 24th of February, there has been a meeting of the minds. People know that in the end, over the medium term, working on climate, moving away from fossil fuels, enhances energy security. There are now two sides of the same coin. And what we are now seeing is an acceleration of energy efficiency, of trying to roll out renewables faster, of getting more biogas, and of getting rid of the dependency of imported energy. People have understood that green energy is freedom energy.
On this note, indeed, that's a metaphor that's often used now, and it has a true core. Renewables energy is energy that doesn't create dependence, at least not to the same extent, on foreign or imported fuels, carbon fuels. And it's also possible to create, and that would be part of leapfrogging in Ukraine, to create a decentralized renewable system. And what we see now is Russian attacks targeted to centralized energy infrastructure. So that's much harder to do if you create independence, not only as a country, but per consumer. I think that's an important feature of renewable energy.
Yes, I completely agree. We need to strengthen the decentralized systems. And as GIZ already supported Ukraine in the decarbonization process, we always also will support Ukraine in the future to mitigate, but also to adaptate to the climate change. And in the past, we've supported, for example, in Lviv, the rehabilitation of the old city center. And there also we've heard about elements to integrate energy efficiency in the rehabilitation process, yes, in the UNESCO sites and so on. So building up on these experiences, and already we have supported to renovate some building codes related to that. So some work has already been done, but it needs to move forward and to put more emphasis in it. Also coming up from the local level to the national level to broaden it down to other projects, cities, and so on. Thank you.
And we will have one short question more, and we have to finish our. Do we have any short question?
Wolfgang Teubner, Local Governments for Sustainability, ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability. Just a quick one following up what was said before. What is, I mean, I heard a lot about civil society stakeholders, but I think the only relevant answer was made to the role of local governments, because most of the destroyal is happening in cities. And how much do you see also potential to incapacitate now local governments to have a more bottom-up approach to this rebuild and resilience? And maybe on renewables, do you also think there are chances to build something like community energy in Ukraine, which also creates different value chain, brings different economic actors and different models for value capturing on a local or regional scale?
Yeah, if I can start, I think that's precisely what is meant when we talk about building back Ukraine better. It is on the one hand, of course, to avoid that everything is centralized, so to acknowledge the crucial role that citizens and communities, municipalities can play. For this, it needs a change in mindset, sure. It also needs a change of the framework in many respects, but that's where I believe Ukraine will be open in the near future. And this needs to be in a process that includes the citizens through community energy, for instance, or other forms of aggregation. But it also needs this element of good national planning. And that's what the national energy and climate plans that I mentioned are there for. So all the pieces need to be brought in a way that allows for pioneering, for doing things faster, for experimenting, but also for making sure that Ukraine as a country is moving on this path as fast as possible and as efficient as possible.
To supplement what was just said, you now have in the Ukraine a very centralized system of electricity supply. That has led to clear vulnerabilities. If that system gets knocked out, no one has electricity. We have to get to a decentralized system, and renewables are typically well equipped to do so. However, you also need then to deal with a number of things that are very different from, say, a nuclear system. That is, how do you deal with intermittency? What do you need to do to modernize the grid so that it can cope with the intermittency? These are technical issues, but also regulatory issues. And then I come back to your point. The regulations that you will apply in the day after tomorrow, you should start writing now.
Yes, and maybe to add, we have to understand that the decentralization process is a political process. Yes, because transferring competences and funding to the local level needs trust so that the local level will be able to take their decisions. But not to forget, these decisions need to be in line with the regional and national policies. Yes, so yeah, we will go on also to support the Ukraine in this big challenges to do so, but definitely we need the local level and also the people living there, but also the business sector to really to be able to achieve the climate green future.
So I thank you very much for all our participants, panelists, and we hear that there is a lot of work to do for Ukrainian government, for Ukrainian citizens, for local level, but we are grateful for all our partners who help us, and we strongly believe that with this support and help, we will build back better. I thank you very much, all my honored panelists today, and if you have any yeah, and you can talk to our panelists later on and find them. Yeah.
Thank you very much and all the best for the future and for the winter.
Thank you.
Indeed, despite all the things you're going through, think also that there will be, after this darkness, brightness. You have to build your country up, and you have to think about that already now.
And what that needs, because the question was raised, you see there is a lot of support, and that's really a great phenomenon, how the international community stands behind Ukraine. But they're also observing what happens in Ukraine. What is needed now, and especially for the building back process after the war, is confidence in all the decision maker in the system, so that everybody is ready to go and come in for investment very fast.
Yes, we are here now and in future to support you to build up a green future. And maybe mainly we will be able, as GIZ, to support you in capacity building.